Next up is Fraulein Elsa's Cabinet of Curiosities for American Horror Story Freak Show. Buongiorno everyone, Clams Mahoney here, your source for SoCal fun and excitement. And today's Clamsploration, we're at the Paley Center for Media to visit the American Horror Story, The Style of Scare exhibit. This is a free exhibit they're holding in downtown Los Angeles, and they have costumes, props, multimedia presentations about the famous anthology show. If you haven't watched the show, don't watch this video because I don't want to spoil anything. If you guys enjoy my Clamsplorations and you would like to see more, consider hitting that subscribe. I release a new video every Saturday morning, so that way you don't want to miss it. Now let's go inside and see what kind of horror we can find. In the premiere chapter of American Horror Story, the Harmons leave their family problems behind in Boston to start a new life in the Los Angeles house of their dreams. But after they settle into the beautifully restored mansion, they become the latest victims of the property's haunted, mysterious past, and must survive the bizarre occurrences inside the place locally known as the Murder House. Now, the Harmon's neighbor is a spirited older woman named Constance, who is played by JESSICA Lange. Now, Constance is their next door neighbor, but she lived in the house at one point and has sort of a past, and she also has several children that have both come and gone. This is Rubber Man. He was the icon of the season. Whenever you saw posters or things like that, that's Rubber Man. But Rubber Man is actually Tate Langdon. Tate Langdon was Constance's son, and it was revealed throughout the show that he was a killer and a mass murderer. He was involved in an incident where he shot up his school and killed a whole bunch of innocent people, and also burned a man alive. He was eventually taken down after the school shooting by the police, but in the Halloween episode, the ghosts of the victims from the school shooting came back to haunt him for a night and plagued him, and the Harmon's daughter, who was in love with him, couldn't figure out why they were chasing him, but it was later revealed that he was responsible for their death. When the Harmons move into their murder house mansion, they find that they inherited a living Moira O'Hare. Now, to normal people, Moira appears as an older woman, but to the head of the Harmon household, she appears as a young, attractive redhead. Now, when she was a young, attractive woman, she had an affair with Constance's husband. She was working in the murder house and Constance was living there. Constance found out and ended up shooting Moira in the eye, killing her. And so now she appears as an old woman. Hey everyone, the sign they had up at the event for American Horror Story Asylum was damaged, so they had to take it down. So instead, I'm just going to read you the bio off of Rotten Tomatoes. The horror unfolds within the confines of an eerie insane asylum in the second series of this acclaimed thriller. Set in 1964 with jumps to the present day, the Asylum series digs into the dark past of the hospital's patients, doctors, and administrators. JESSICA Lange returns to the series as Sister Jude, a troubled nun who quickly finds herself at odds with the twisted Arthur Arden, a doctor with a penchant for experimental procedures. Zachary Quinto is also back as Dr. Oliver Thedison, a psychiatrist, while Sarah Paulson plays journalist Lana Winters in her returns. Other familiar faces include Evan Peters and Lily Rabb, return for the second season to round out the incredibly talented cast. Several times during American Horror Story Asylum, the Scathach, or the Angel of Death, is called upon to take people away. She takes them away by administering her kiss of death, where she spreads her wings and gives them a kiss. In this particular season, she was played by actress Frances Conroy, who played Moira O'Hare in the second season. If you're not familiar, American Horror Story likes to recycle the actors or actresses into new roles. So in this season, Frances Conroy played the Angel of Death, or the Scathach. The main character of American Horror Story Asylum was Sister Judy Martin, who was played by JESSICA Lange. Here she is in her normal clothes. She was a very tough-as-nails, no-nonsense nun who ran the Briarcliff Asylum, and she had to deal with all the inmates and the crazies and like a psychotic doctor who was a former Nazi, and he was creating zombies. It was a lot going on in that season. Now this is a more typical outfit for Sister Judy Martin. This is the outfit that Jessica Lange wore most of the time, which was her typical nun outfit. In the movie, in the season, she would often wear red lingerie underneath. So the question is, do you think she's wearing red lingerie underneath this? For each season of American Horror Story, there is a monster or a killer that is stalking the main characters, or at least the main group of characters. For American Horror Story Asylum, that main character was Bloodyface. Now, he had various incarnations throughout the season, but this seemed to be the main one. Now, what I personally liked was his fashion choice. You can see that, yes, he is wearing someone else's skin and their hair and teeth, but he's also fashionable enough to wear their dress, too. So, I mean, he might be a killer, but at least he has good taste. Towards the end of the season, June Martin ends up becoming an inmate of the asylum and a victim to all those that she had tormented throughout her career as the head sister there. And this is her costume. As you can see, her hair is disheveled as opposed to her wigs before, where you can see they're more pristine and nice, and now they're all ratty. American Horror Story Coven. Though it has been over 300 years since the trials of Salem, the ancestors of the infamous witches face unimaginable peril in the magical third chapter of American Horror Story. With the bloodline facing extinction, young, powerful descendants are sent to Miss Robichek's academy not only protection, but also to learn the history of their kind, while mastering the dark arts of witchcraft. But with threats lurking in the most unpredictable places, the young witches must fight a war on multiple fronts to ensure the survival of the Coven. Now, this will be really cool for me because American Horror Story Coven is my personal favorite season. Partly because it takes place in New Orleans, and I love that city, but also just, I thought it was a really fun season. This is a fancy dress outfit worn by Myrtle Snow. Now, after Myrtle is resurrected, she gets a bit of a makeover. And this is kind of her coming out, more fancier dress outfit, as you can see. They kind of put these in the window, so it's hard to get footage of it, but very nice outfit. Kathy Bates made her introduction into American Horror Story in season 3 with Coven, and she played a real-life serial killer named Madame Delphine Lalaurie. Now, if you guys don't know who she is, she was basically a socialite, so a very rich woman of the 1700s, I believe, and she basically violently, brutally murdered her slaves. Now, the show covers on it a bit, but I've been to the real house of hers in New Orleans, and they told us a story, a ghost story about what she actually did to it, and it's just horrific. The show does some things, but nothing compared to what that woman actually did to those poor people. The head supreme of Miss Robichek's academy is Fiona Good, who is played in this season by Jessica Lange. Now, she's not a very good supreme. She's basically selfish and only cares about herself, even to the point where she doesn't really care about her own daughter. Her goal is to prolong her life. And as the season's going on, that her health is starting to wane, which means that the new supreme is starting to come around. And being a evil, manipulative person, Fiona plots against her. The misfits that comprise Fraulein Elsa's Cabinet of Curiosities depend upon the peaceful town of Jupiter, Florida in 1952, in American Horror Story's gruesome 4th chapter. Just as America's last surviving freak show breaks ground, a string of unsolved murders is pinned on the traveling carnival's starring act, and unlock a fathomable evil that threatens both the performers and the local residents. Does this look like a doll's dress? Would you believe that this is actually worn by the world's smallest woman? Her name was Juliette Amage. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. But she played my favorite character on the show, Ma Petite. She was just this tiny little woman that would go around and she would like be carried around by Miss Elsa and she would have a little show. I always enjoyed her characters because she would always go, Miss Elsa, Miss Elsa. This is the costume for Jimmy Darling. which was played in this season by Evan Peters. Yep. But Jimmy was a very strong force in the freak show. He worked for Miss Elsa, and he was very passionate about his family, his freak family. He was a very interesting character. Later in the season, he became a love interest for Betty and Dot. This is the costume for Betty and Dot Taylor, the Siamese sisters. They were both played by Sarah Paulson. How it would happen is that Sarah Paulson would play one side. She would shoot all her scenes as, say, Betty. And while she was doing that, they would have a prop head that looked like her other head. Now, when it came time to do the other scene, she would switch over and she would play Dot, and she would shoot all the scenes, and they would switch the head over. Now, yes, it is true that as the freak show descends, murder started happening, and as people tend to do, they think it is the freaks that are doing it. But it is actually this. This is a costume worn by Twisty the Clown, who's portrayed by John Carroll Lynch. He is a former circus clown who befell a horrible fate, and now travels the land basically murdering people and abducting children and kidnapping them back to his abandoned school bus that he has turned into a prison. Here they have a bust of what Twisty's face actually looked like. Now, Twisty was a peaceful clown who loved entertaining children. That was his favorite thing to do. But through a horrible series of miscommunication, or on purpose, he was accused of basically murdering and or molesting children. And getting very upset, he eventually took a shotgun and blew the bottom half of his jaw off. And I'm sure this does not help with people's irrational fear of clowns. American Horror Story Hotel. Mayhem reigns over the unrelenting fifth chapter of American Horror Story. After a series of grisly murders leads Detective John Law through the front doors of a stylish Art Deco property, the beautiful yet blood-sucking owner must protect herself from the oncoming fury by summoning all the strange mysteries and horror that exists within Hotel Cortez. It's the Countess Hotel, and you're just dying in it. Here we have an outfit worn by the Countess, which was played by her introduction into Horror Story by Lady Gaga. Now, when I took the Unmasking the Horror tour and we went on the American Horror Story maze in Orlando, Florida for their Halloween Horror Nights, they revealed that each costume that Lady Gaga wore in the show was custom made for her. They are all handmade and they are all quite expensive. So when it came time to do the maze, they had to remake all the costumes, but obviously they can't spend thousands of dollars to make them, so they had to kind of make somewhat of a budgeted version of them. Now, in American Horror Story Hotel, the Countess is a vampire, but not a typical vampire like you think. She doesn't have fangs to drink blood, so basically she has this custom gloved hand, with these razor blades on it, and she then slices the throat of any one of her victims and just drinks their blood that way. Evan Peters played James Patrick March. He was the owner and creator of the hotel. Now, his whole thing is he's based on a real-life Chicago hotel owner named H.H. Holmes, who designed What's the Murder Hotel. Just like in American Story Hotel, he had a hotel full with secret rooms and traps and doors where he could basically murder people. Now, James Patrick March had a pièce de résistance, something that he was planning to do with his life's work, if you will. And this is part of it. He wanted to create murders and deaths on all of the 10 deadly sins from the Bible. Now, this was the final one. Now, this is shall not murder, and as you can see, it's Lady Gaga's head, or the Countess's head. But basically, he didn't get to complete it, so John Lowe's character became his protege, and Evan Peters' ghost ended up walking him through it and helping him complete it. And now on to our final American Horror Story display for the most current season. As I said prior to Cult, which premieres on September 5th, we have American Horror Story Roanoke. The mysteries of Roanoke's lost colony came alive in the latest chapter of American Horror Story. When a young couple decides to settle in an old farmhouse located on hollowed ground, they soon come face to face with dark, bloody, and horrifying truth inside one of America's greatest secrets. Their plight becomes the hit series My Roanoke Nightmare, and its success lures them back where they discover the nightmare never ended. Agnes Mary Winstead, who played the Butcher, who was ultimately played by Kathy Bates here in the reenactment version, which took place in the first half of American Horror Story, Roanoke. She was a pilgrim from kind of when there were pilgrims, early pilgrims, and she made a promise to a spirit witch for eternal life or something, and ended up killing all of her colony people, even her own son, when they turned on her and sent her out into the woods. But this was the costume that Kathy Bates wore. How the season worked is the first season was kind of like a haunting, where it's like reenactments and things like that. But later, it goes into like a reality show. Like they take the actors, the real people that they encountered, and the actresses that played them, and actors, and they put them in the house together. Now, eventually the real versions of the people show up. So the real Butcher showed up. Now, when I first watched this, I always kind of hoped that it would have been played by Jessica Lange, making her return to American Horror Story, but unfortunately that wasn't so. Lady Gaga had a smaller role this season in American Horror Story compared to her headlining of last season. She played what was called the Scathitch, a forest witch. And she was the one who let the Butcher become immortal. She gave him her power, and she made her eat a heart. That's what I remember. This is a costume worn by Rory Monahan, who was playing the man who built the Roanoke mansion that they lived in. He was played by Evan Peters. His whole thing was that he was escaping to be somewhere quiet, and he loved his paintings, so he had tons and tons of paintings, and that eventually they were destroyed somehow by the pilgrims, their spirits, and he eventually got killed. But he had an underground tunnel, and he helped the main couple that was being attacked escape. Now, each season of American Horror Story has a killer, like I said. And for this one, the main killer was Pigman. It was a pilgrim who was brutally murdered, and he was forced to wear pig's head. This was partly his costume. You can see the apron. He's got the pig hands there. But the main thing was that he would wear a pig head. He was the main killer that would appear both in the first part as the reenactment, and then later as the real part. This is more of the real version of what he looked like. As our Clamsploration of the American Horror Story Style of Scare exhibit comes to a close, I leave you with this giant mural of all the past seasons. The new season comes back on September 5th. And if you guys enjoy my content, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. I release a new video every Saturday morning, and until next time, always remember, keep it kosher.